Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Maybe the facility you manage could establish new revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services. Cart King International can be the answer to your needs. Cart King is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile coffee, food, and retail carts and kiosks. Cart King has been working with clients and corporations across North America for 20 years, providing innovative designs, custom manufacturing, and timely delivery. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on our website. Please visit us today at www.cart-king.com or just call us at 1-877-986-7771 and get your sales rolling.
If you find yourself in need of legal representation, it can be a very stressful time in your life. In my career, I have dealt with thousands of lawyers, I've dealt with thousands of law firms, and I can confidently recommend to you Keith M. Davidson at kmdlaw.com. Available 24 hours, 7 days a week. Just log into kmdlaw.com. That's kmdlaw.com. Or you can call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. That's 833-4KMD-LAW. Personal injury, wrongful death, STDs, sexual assault, car accidents. They handle it all efficiently and professionally. It doesn't matter how imposing the opposition may be, because the team at kmdlaw.com are battle-tested and fierce. They will not stop until justice prevails. Go to kmdlaw.com or call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. If you're in for the fight of your life, stop screwing around and contact KMD Law. PureSoapFlakes.com, 218-568-2525. Have you ever heard of Castile Soap? Pure Soap Flake Company handcrafts fine soap bars, laundry powder, and concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oils from their northern Minnesota facility. Bathe your body and wash your clothes with Pure Soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium lauryl sulfate, and synthetic additives. Keep it clean, folks. Pure Soap Flake Company products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin, safe for drains and waterways, and work great in high-efficiency washers and top and front-loading machines. They have a little promotion going on. Contact them to order some soap. Mention the Opperman Report. You're going to get a free gift. They're going to sing a little extra soap, travel size, soap bars and laundry soap, cleaning soap flakes. I've been using that stuff all day long today. Great stuff. Order today at puresoapflakes.com or give them a call, 218-568-2525, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company is a proud member of the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetic Guild. The Opperman Report is brought to you by Aquadam.net. You can give them a call at 707-764-2119. A flooded home is never easy to deal with. You're left with the mess to clean up, the insurance companies to deal with, and not to mention all the memories, the precious memories that are lost in the flood. You can never replace those. And Aquadam can be a tool in your arsenal to protect your home and property from the floodwaters. The cofferdam is filled with water to control water and is reusable as long as it's taken care of. It can protect your home or business from rising floodwaters like a dam, but without the beavers. It can also be used in construction. If you need an area to be dewatered, an Aquadam can do the job. An Aquadam was used at SeaWorld in Orlando for the Mako roller coaster ride during the coaster's construction by dewatering the work area. An Aquadam is now dewatering the work area at San Antonio SeaWorld for their newest roller coaster ride. An Aquadam has been used in many construction projects all around the U.S. and all around the world. Now give Aquadam a call, 707-764-2119. You can look them up online at aquadam.net. You can find them on Facebook at Aquadam Inc. You call them up, you email them, you tell them Ed Opperman sent you, and they're going to take 10% off the price. Aquadam.net, 707-764-2119.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting through my website, emailrevealer.com, or you can just email me directly at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. If you like our show, check out our Patreon at the Opperman Report Patreon. We have kind of exclusive content up there you won't find anywhere on AM, FM, or on the internet. But our archives are always free. You can find that at Spreaker.com. Our guest today is Anthony Daly, and he came to us through his Andrew Loney. We just had the show the other day, brought us Mr. Daly. He wrote a book called The Abuse of Power, a true story of sex scandal at the heart of London's elite. So it's pretty much along those same lines that we've been doing Richard Kerr and Andrew Loney. Mr. Daly, are you there?
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. Tell us about yourself. Who is Anthony Daly?
Always wanted to work in a bookshop, and indeed, when I did leave school, that's exactly what I did. Worked in a small bookshop here in Derry, or Londonderry as it's known sometimes. However, the bookshop was blown up, and there were various troubles, various things happened. I had lost a friend during Bloody Sunday in 1972. But in 1974, around Christmas, I met a girl, and it was basically love at first sight. However, she was studying art at a college in England, and she returned after the Christmas holidays. Now, I decided that I wanted to continue and pursue this relationship, but I also decided that it was time to get out of Northern Ireland. I just couldn't take any more of the killings and the shootings, bombings day in and day out. So I applied for a job in a big bookshop. At that time, it was actually the biggest bookshop in the world. It was called Foyle's Bookshop, and it was in Charing Cross Road in London. And I worked in the antiquarian book department. So this was the beginning of a new life, a new career for me. I was 20 years old at the time. So I moved to London, and very quickly the dream became a nightmare. I was there about a week, and it was a weekend, and I was walking down Oxford Street, noticed a group of people around a table, and they were doing the old the 3 cups and the ball routine where you had to guess where the ball was.
Sure.
So I watched this for a few minutes, and I had £20 with me, and basically I was getting it right every time, identifying, and I was thinking, this is a great way to double my money. But of course, when I put the money down, he lifted the cup, and it was in a different cup. And I said right away, this is a big mistake. Is there any way I could get the money back? And one of them called coppers, and they ran away. So it was a complete scam. So I was completely penniless, didn't know what to do or who to turn to. And I had a few coppers left, and I made my way to Piccadilly Circus, which is around the heart of London. And I happened to see this amusement arcade called Playland. I walked inside there, and I had nothing to lose. I had a few coppers left in my pocket, so I threw them in and lost everything. So I decided to walk back out and hung over the railings beside the railings outside the Playland, and basically wondering what would I do next. So this guy had followed me out from Playland, and he introduced himself as Keith Hunter, and he said, "We look a bit lost and lonely, what's your story?" So I told him what had happened, and he said, "Well, I'm really sorry to hear that. I'm going to a pub to meet a friend of mine, a guy called Charles Hornby. Feel free to come along if you want to have a meal." And I said, "But I really don't have money." So he said, "Not a problem. Sort you out." He said, "My mum was Irish, I wouldn't see stuck." So I went to this pub, met up with a guy called Charles Hornby, had a chat. I was drinking Coca-Cola. We seemed to get on fine, and then they invited me to go for a meal. And during the course of the meal, they were basically asking me a lot of questions about myself, who I was, where I was from, what I was doing. Thinking back now, it was a sort of very polite interrogation. They were finding out everything about me, where I worked, my family. And then they said, "Well, if you come back to my apartment, I can give you £20, consider it a loan, and we'll sort it out." So I had been drinking at this time, we just wine during the meal, and went back to the apartment, and they insisted that I try more wine and port and so on. And basically I started feeling unwell and said, "I really need to get home, I'm not feeling well." So they said okay, and one of them went to get a coat, and as I was walking down the corridor to leave, I was dragged into a bedroom, basically slapped about and forced down, and Charles Hornby raped me. That was utterly shocking and horrific, and I passed out and woke up the next morning, and Hornby was there, and basically as if nothing had happened. And I tried to get out, and he said, "Look, we picked you up. We thought you were new on the game, that you were cruising." And I said, I had nothing to do with this, so that wasn't my intention at all. What I told you was true. And he was basically saying, "Yeah, they all say that." But he said that he found me a bright young man, very articulate, and he said, I would like to introduce you to some of my friends. I said, I know some very important people who would like to spend some time with you. And I said, this isn't going to happen. This is going nowhere. You've got me all wrong. He then tried to blackmail me. He said that he had taken indecent photographs of me when I was unconscious and that he could send these back to my family in Ireland and how would they respond. So I was panicking and I said, please don't do this, don't do this. And they said, well, just think it over and we'll see how we get on. But they also informed me that they had actually drugged me that night. They said, you looked a bit tense, so we drugged you to put you at ease. So that's what had happened. And then after that, they contacted me again. They visited the bookshop and started to threaten and intimidate. And I basically said, this is going nowhere else. I'm going to report this to the police. Now, I should explain that at that time in England, there was an IRA bombing campaign going on, and there was a lot of ill feeling towards the Irish community in England and London at that time. And he basically said, you know, you have two choices here. We're going to invite you to a party this weekend. If you don't go to that party, you'll find yourself in a police cell having a confession kicked out of you. So it's your choice. So I just felt totally cornered. And he said, okay, let's go. And he took me around London and he had my hair cut. He bought some very expensive clothes, a suit, trousers, a shirt and tie, completely, literally groomed me for this party at the weekend. And I went along to the party and I was abandoned there. And it was a party basically thrown by an organisation called the Monday Club, which was a branch of the Conservative Party. And they were essentially celebrating the fact that Margaret Thatcher was elected leader of the Conservative Party at that time. So very quickly, I drank as much drink as I could consume. The only thing that I wanted to do was get drunk and get through this. But at that party, I was raped by a member of Parliament. And that's when it started into this spiral. After that, I was pimped out of this amusement arcade Playland and introduced to various people, more MPs, a couple of members of the House of Lords. But it wasn't just politicians, it was businessmen, prominent businessmen from the world of finance, from the world of publishing and insurance, and even the oil industry. And this went on for a few weeks, and I was taking more and more drink and taking more and more drugs, basically just to get through it. It really came to a head when I was introduced at a meal to a group of people who were members of an organisation called PI, which stood for the Paedophile Information Exchange. And they told me that I was being taken to the best show in London that night. So I ended up in a small apartment there, and there were a group of people who were waiting, having drinks and so on. And they proceeded then to produce two young boys. I was told they were brothers, aged 8 and 10. And they proceeded to sexually abuse these boys. I swore at them and jumped off the seat and tried to stop it, but I then was sexually abused and attacked and raped again and beaten unconscious. So after that, I went to one of the guys that I was pimped to was a guy called Simon Hornby. Now, he was actually the older brother of Charles. And strangely enough, I got on quite well with him. We spent a lot of time talking about books and literature and history. So I felt, well, if I'm spending time with him, at least I'm not spending time with some of the people who are, shall we say, a little bit more perverted. So I begged Simon after that attack, could he release me from Playland? And he said he would do what he would try and do. So he succeeded. I don't know what the arrangement was, if I was sublet to Simon, but he released me from Playland. The only problem was that he said, I now want you to sleep with some of my associates in my network. So it became a more pleasant and less torturous form of abuse, albeit still abuse. And he circulated me around his associates. And it basically involved being taken to expensive hotels and restaurants around London, having dinner with these different men, and then being sexually abused after it. So I just became totally brainwashed into this sort of life. It was what I had to do to survive. I basically thought if I can survive being shot at and being blew up in Northern Ireland, then I would get through this and something would happen. I would get out. But my health was progressively getting worse and worse. I was in agony with back pains, which may have been from the couple of kickings that I had received, until finally I attempted to take my own life and begged Simon Hornby to let me go. So I think he didn't want me dying in bed with a client, so they finally let me go. And this happened over the space of a number of months. But I mean, each week seemed like a month back then. It was a completely torturous and horrific.
So it was 20 years old when this started. So this was really less than a year.
Less than a year.
Yes.
So how did you escape? Where did you go after this?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, where did you go after this?
All right, I came straight back home to Northern Ireland and basically locked myself away for a year. Hardly left the house. But I did get a job then in the local library service the following year. But actually the next year, in October 1976, in the early hours of the morning, our house was raided by the British Army. And they said that they were looking for guns or explosives, but it was basically an excuse to turn the house upside down. And at that time, this was like social housing. The houses were rented, and the officer in charge had to fill out a little form. It was called a search damage claim form. It meant that you could go to your landlord and claim back money for any damage that had been done during the search. So he asked for me by name and tore off the slip and said, "Consider this a calling card from your friends in London." So it was basically a warning. And one of the things I noticed after the search was that a lot of the little bits and pieces that I had brought over from London, such as the business cards that various people had given me, were all taken. Little notes with thank you, some bits of paper from the House of Commons had all vanished. So that really sent me a message. It was quite alarming at that time to think that the army could come in and basically arrest me or do anything they wanted at that time. So between that and 1979, I happily fell in love again and got married. And the year I was married, 1979, I was working in a school in Derry at that time. In a school library, in fact. And one day out of the blue, this politician who I had been with in London on 3 occasions walked in the door with the headmaster. He had been appointed to a position in Northern Ireland at that time, and he was doing a tour of the school, and I was asked to show him around the library and show him the various resources and so on. So we were walking a few feet ahead of the others, and he said, "You didn't say goodbye." So I was completely shocked and astounded because, at that time the war was going on in Ireland, and if a member of Parliament was visiting anywhere, the security forces would have been told, the RUC at the time would have been told, and there would have been a big security operation. So I just felt that it was another way of saying, we can walk into your life at any time and do anything. But more shocking than that was, after I had shown him around, he was up at the top of the library with some of the VIPs. There was the chairman of the board, who was a priest, and various people from the Parents Association, and the principal and the vice principal. So his private secretary came down and said he wanted to have a photograph taken with you. And I said, well, why on earth would he want my photograph? There's people up there that are more important than me. But I insisted on having the photograph taken. And I actually have a copy of that photograph to this day, which I kept. But it was very disconcerting and very shocking to know that someone could walk into my life at that time.
Did he try and make contact with you after the event there at the school?
No, I heard nothing more from him after that. I half expected him to pass on a message from Simon Hornby on my behalf, but he didn't say anything. It was just basically, you never said goodbye, and then let's have this photograph taken. I mean, essentially it was a trophy photograph to show his friends back in London, and it was to send me a message as well.
So what was the next incident?
Well, the next thing then, I basically had put this out of my mind for a number of years. I had children and a family and had a career, so it all sort of faded into the past. I thought no more about it. But in the early 90s to the late 90s, there started to be stories about abuse appearing in news items involving the Catholic Church. And then some reports started appearing about MPs and politicians being involved in abuse. And one Sunday I came across a newspaper headline to the effect that VIPs were abusing boys, and it sort of took me right back, because when I read this article, it seemed that some of the people involved were basically still at it. They were involved in this in the 80s and 90s. So I decided to basically go and speak to who was a retired bishop at the time, Edward Daly. He was famously the priest who was shown in the footage of Bloody Sunday waving a red handkerchief when they were carrying one of the boys who was shot dead, who was a friend of mine actually. Jackie Duddy was his name. And I went to him and told him the story, and he said, well, the days of priests covering up stories of abuse are gone. So he said, I'll have to report this to the police, which he did do. He made contact with a detective that he knew in Liverpool, and he then subsequently made contact with the Metropolitan Police in London. So the police in London flew me over for a series of interviews, and I basically, for the first time in all those years, told them exactly what had happened. One of the days they drove me around the various locations where the abuse had taken place. And a lot of people then, including the police, were telling me, you should write this down, just write a brief account. If it ever goes to court, you can have your memories down on paper about what happened. So I was getting advice from the police, and my own doctor was saying it, and I was receiving counselling at the time as well. And everyone was saying, just write down an account. So I started doing more and more research into what had happened. And I wanted to know who actually owned this arcade. Who was actually behind all this. And I was interviewed by the BBC for one of their sort of premiere radio shows. And that generated a lot of publicity. And I think I mentioned in that I was going to actually write a book about what had happened. And once that interview was broadcast in, some things started to kick off again. I received a phone call from my credit card company saying that my details had been compromised, and that there was some suspicious activity on the card. And then sometime after that, my house was actually burgled. This was in June of 2015, as I recall. So the house was burgled, and I had a home study which was wrecked. There was a filing cabinet broken open. Some of the research material I had was removed, and there was actually a small safe. I had a small wall safe which was completely ripped out of the wall and taken away as well. So there was some sensitive information and details that I had gathered about some of the people involved, and indeed some of the information that I had received about them in the intervening time. So I decided to go ahead. The police obviously investigated this break-in, and they said, well, there's nothing they can do about it. There were no leads, there was no evidence, and so on. So that was the end of that. And I continued to write the book. But then, out of the blue, the following year, the police arrived at the house with a warrant, basically saying that they had intelligence. Now, they wouldn't say what this intelligence was, but they said that they had intelligence that linked my home to indecent images of children. So they searched the home. They took a computer that I had and a laptop and some phones. Now, the interesting thing is, when my house was burgled the first time, everything was left. They took the safe, they took jewellery, some papers and bits and pieces. The only thing they didn't take was the desktop computer or the laptop or an iPhone and some bits and pieces. However, in this case, the police took everything that they hadn't taken. So I was bailed and continued to write the book. And then a year later, I went in for an interview with the police, with my solicitor. And they basically said that they had discovered 11 indecent images on my computer. And could I explain how they got there? So I said, well, I have no explanation how I knew nothing about it. But an interesting event happened. They said to me, have you ever seen child pornography? And I said, well, as a matter of fact, not only have I seen child pornography, which was shown to me in 1975, I said I actually witnessed children being sexually abused. And the police officer interviewing me didn't bat an eyelid. You know, you would have thought they would have asked, well, who was involved in this abuse? Were you involved in it? Have you got the names of the people? Because for all they knew, these people could still be alive. But they just went right back to the issue of these alleged indecent images. So my solicitor had said, because they obviously had done a forensic examination, they had an IT expert examine the computer. And normally, if this is the case, they can tell you if you download or distribute indecent images, they know exactly, right down to the second, when these were sent, when they were arrived, when they were stored on your computer. And my solicitor said, when were these actually downloaded? So he shuffled through this forensic report that he had and said, well, we don't actually have that information there. So my solicitor said, well, maybe it would be important if you could find that out, because it could be that Mr. Daly possibly was out of the country when these alleged images were downloaded. So the interview ended. I was released again on bail. And then subsequently another year passed, and I got a phone call to say that they wouldn't be pressing charges. So I have no doubt that all this thing was contrived basically to stop me writing this book about the abuse of power and to stop me naming some of the people involved in the abuse. But I said,
Let me ask you something real quick, because you mentioned before that the police in Liverpool went to all the effort and expense to fly you over there to interview you about these crimes, which is unusual, right? Now, but did anything come of that investigation?
No, nothing. They basically contacted me. They kept in touch after a number of months, but they basically said, well, we have no leads. One of the things they did say was that they interviewed other people who were around Piccadilly Circus in the 1970s, and they said some people have named this guy called Keith, who was Keith Hunter, was the guy that started speaking to me in Piccadilly Circus. And they said, if we have any photographs, would you be prepared to come over and help identify him? And I said, certainly I would. But I heard no more other than the phone call. They said that everyone that I had named was now dead, and as such, there was no point in investigating further. That was the end of the story, as far as they were concerned.
And off there, you were telling me too that the Playland video game store was owned by the people who owned the Sega video game company.
Yeah, this is an interesting sort of American connection, which your listeners may be interested in. There was never anything in the papers about who actually owned Playland. So I decided to look into this and did a bit of research. And I came across this name of a guy called Martin Bromley. He was actually born in New York in 1919. And his father was involved. His father set up a sort of a gaming machine, jukeboxes and slot machines and one-armed bandits and so on. Now, Martin was actually drafted into the Navy in the early 1940s, and he was in Pearl Harbor during the bombing. So during that time, he had made an awful lot of contacts, and after the war, he created a company called Service Games. And then after a few years, they decided to shorten the name. They took the SE from the service and the GA from games and called the new company Sega, which subsequently became a big company. And I think parts of it were sold for about 10 million to some various American conglomerate. But in 1947, Martin had actually been convicted for possessing illegal gaming machines in San Francisco. And in the year after that, he was convicted of robbery. So Martin Bromley was basically involved in using his Navy contacts to move machines to various military bases around Japan, the Philippines, and Guam, and various bases in the Far East, all illegally, of course. And when this came to the attention of the authorities, the Navy actually banned them from and fined them for having anything more to do with the military. And then shortly after that, he decided to leave, and he came to London. And he set up a syndicate, which was basically buying up land and property in London, and that's when they opened Playland and a lot of these other amusement arcades. He actually owned most of the amusement arcades in London. And at the same time then, he was taking advantage of the Vietnam War. He got involved in business there, and he was leasing amusement machines to the army in Vietnam and expanded into importing booze and frozen pizzas and all sort of stuff for them. But by the time Saigon fell, he had made an absolute fortune. But that's who was actually behind this, who owned the Playland. And I'm not saying that he knew personally that there was a rent boy operation operating from it, but there was a small London gang who definitely were operating out of Playland, and I'm sure the local management must have known something.
What about the other video stores that he owned, the other arcades? Any trafficking going on at those locations?
Very possibly, but there's no information. There were certainly no court cases. There was a big investigation actually carried into the Playland arcade, and 5 people were actually prosecuted because of it, including the guy who raped me. But there were a lot of, string pulling behind the scenes because the arcade never closed down in spite of these. And this was about the 3rd scandal involving Playland. So it just seemed that there was some money behind the operation, and for whatever reason it wasn't closed down. But then things came to a head in 1980 because it transpired then that this Bromley's organisation were evading tax. They weren't. They were basically downplaying the amount of income that was coming in through all these amusement arcades, and they weren't paying tax. So it turned out that they owed 10 million in tax to the government. It was the biggest tax avoidance scheme, I think, in UK sort of history. So Martin and his associates were all arrested and then bailed. And there was a very unusual deal done then the following year, where he basically signed a cheque for about 2.5 million in court, handed it over to the taxman, and that was the end of the matter. So the thing was then after that, that Playland was actually shut down because of this financial, but funny enough, not because of the sexual abuse of children over all these years.
Yeah, it's like the old Al Capone story. They got him for taxes rather than all of his crimes.
And Martin was actually, he was subsequently found dead in his bed in Zurich in 2008. It was allegedly that he died of an overdose of Viagra. But there you have it.
Now you mentioned a lot of elite businessmen and politicians. What about celebrities?
There were a few celebrities. I mean, when I was in Playland, it was based there. I've seen some celebrities coming and going. I had no direct dealings with them myself, but some of them were regulars in there. They were people who we'd have seen on British television, for example. Some of whom are still alive, so I can't say too much about that. But there were all sorts of people who used Playland. Most of the people in the know who went to Playland, they didn't go there to play with the machines. They went there to play with the boys, unfortunately.
And you mentioned, too, that your arrest, that you had an iPhone. So this was just recently, right? What year was this?
Oh, this was 2016.
2016.
It was actually my wife's phone. I just had an ordinary Samsung, which they took as well.
Now, have you had any other kind of threats or intimidation since 2016, since that arrest?
No. Well, everything stopped after the book was published. I mean, 2 months after the book was published, that's when I was told that they wouldn't be taking any further, they wouldn't be pressing charges.
What about attempts to bribe you, to pay you off to stop talking on the radio?
No.
That hasn't happened yet. Okay. All right. So let's take a little commercial break. We're here today with Anthony Daly, Tony Daly. The book he's written is called, let me pull this up real fast. It's called The Abuse of Power, a true story of sex and scandal at the heart of London's elite. And the book's you can get it on Amazon.com. It has great reviews. People are talking about how they can't put it down. Explosive and extremely powerful and honest read that I just couldn't put down. Every review is excellent. We'll be right back with more of Tony Daly after these messages. And now a word from our sponsors. If you find yourself in need of legal representation, it can be a very stressful time in your life. In my career, I have dealt with thousands of lawyers, I've dealt with thousands of law firms, and I can confidently recommend to you Keith M. Davidson at kmdlaw.com. Available 24 hours, 7 days a week. Just log into kmdlaw.com. That's kmdlaw.com. Or you can call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. That's 833-4KMD-LAW. Personal injury, wrongful death, STDs, sexual assault, car accidents. They handle it all efficiently and professionally. It doesn't matter how imposing the opposition may be, because the team at kmdlaw.com are battle-tested and fierce. They will not stop until justice prevails. Go to kmdlaw.com or call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. If you're in for the fight of your life, stop screwing around and contact KMD Law.
Are you ready to change your life, but don't know how to start? Is your stress and worries keeping you awake at night? Have you been battling grief, anxiety, or depression all alone? Have you lost touch with your own sense of being or spirituality? Soul Free Therapies offers professional and affordable live video streaming counseling and coaching services from the comfort of your own home. Sessions offered in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Go to our website at www.soul-free.com and book your first session today.
The Opperman Report is brought to you by Aquadam.net. You can give them a call at 707-764-2119. A flooded home is never easy to deal with. You're left with the mess to clean up, the insurance companies to deal with, and not to mention all the memories, the precious memories that are lost in the flood. You can never replace those. And Aquadam can be a tool in your arsenal to protect your home and property from the floodwaters. The cofferdam is filled with water to control water and is reusable as long as it's taken care of. It can protect your home or business from rising floodwaters like a dam, but without the beavers. It can also be used in construction. If you need an area to be dewatered, an Aquadam can do the job. An Aquadam was used at SeaWorld in Orlando for the Mako roller coaster ride during the coaster's construction by dewatering the work area. An Aquadam is now dewatering the work area at San Antonio SeaWorld for their newest roller coaster ride. An Aquadam has been used in many construction projects all around the U.S. and all around the world. Now give Aquadam a call, 707-764-2119. You can look them up online at aquadam.net. You can find them on Facebook at Aquadam Inc. You call them up, you email them, you tell them Ed Opperman sent you, and they're going to take 10% off the price. Aquadam.net, 707-764-2119. PureSoapFlakes.com, 218-568-2525. Have you ever heard of Castile Soap? Pure Soap Flake Company handcrafts fine soap bars, laundry powder, and concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oils from their northern Minnesota facility. Bathe your body and wash your clothes with Pure Soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium lauryl sulfate, and synthetic additives. Keep it clean, folks. Pure Soap Flake Company products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin, safe for drains and waterways, and work great in high-efficiency washers and top and front-loading machines. They have a little promotion going on. Contact them to order some soap. Mention the Opperman Report. You're going to get a free gift. They're going to send a little extra soap, travel size, soap bars and laundry soap, cleaning soap flakes. I've been using that stuff all day long today. Great stuff. Order today at puresoapflakes.com or give them a call, 218-568-2525, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company is a proud member of the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetic Guild.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. We're here today with Anthony Daly, who's written a book, The Abuse of Power, a true story of sex and scandal at the heart of London's elite. Basically, a story about how when he was a young man, he traveled over to London and got caught up with a bunch of human traffickers, blackmailing him and threatening his life, beating him up and raping and molesting him. Now, Anthony, you grew up in Northern Ireland during the time of the Troubles, which must have been highly traumatic, all the bombing going on around you. Yeah. And then you went through this other trauma, with sexual abuse and witnessing little boys getting raped right before your eyes, getting beaten up, blackmailed, arrested. You've had a life of serious trauma. How do you deal with all that?
Yeah. The first thing I should mention is that after this happened, when I returned to Ireland, let's say for about 1979, after I got married, I really put this all behind me. I didn't even think about it. And it didn't, funny enough, it didn't torture me over the years. It's like life just sort of, it covers up the past in some ways, and you become much more focused on your wife and your children and your career. And that was really the focus. Thankfully, I was 20 years old, and I thought I was able to cope with it okay. I mean, one of the things that I feel really sorry for is young children who this may have happened to them. They were a lot younger, obviously, and sometimes over a longer period. And that can be truly traumatic. And I really feel sorry for the children involved. It was bad enough for me, age 20, and it happened in a relatively short time span. So I was able to put it away, but only until these stories then of abuse started appearing and becoming more high profile on the television. That's what really triggered it all off. But it's interesting you say about dealing with this, because when I was interviewed by the Metropolitan Police, once I had given the statements and they recorded everything, and I have to say that they were completely professional about it and sympathetic. They actually said to me, "You're going to need to get counselling to deal with this." And I said, "No, I'm absolutely fine. I'm okay." But they said, "This is you won't put this toothpaste back in the tube. You're going to have to confront and deal with this." And it was only when I returned home after that I started feeling, in one day in particular, I arrived home and the house was empty. And this flash about taking my own life just travelled through my head for like a few seconds. And I was immediately embarrassed about it, that I would have had such a thought. So I phoned an organisation called the Nexus Institute, and it did arrange to have counselling. So over the next 10 weeks, I met a counsellor and sat down with her and told her everything that had happened and talked about the past. And I have to say, she didn't say very much, but she let me talk and tell the story and think about it and reflect about it. And what was happening at that time was that I was seeing these images of some of the things that had happened really playing on a loop inside my head. You know, I could have been sitting at work on a computer, but I was actually looking past the screen, looking into the past and seeing what was happening. So she said, you know, you've left this 20-year-old in the past, and you need to find some way of rescuing him and bringing him forward. You need to confront this and actually deal with it. So that was really, really useful. And she said as well, why don't you try writing down, just write down an account of what happened, and it might help you to be cathartic and come to terms with you know, what you've been through. So that's exactly what I've done.
When you were arrested, do you believe that the arresting officers were involved directly, or were they unaware of how you were set up?
To be honest, I don't actually know, but here's one interesting aspect of this story. The man that took me under his wing, Sir Simon Hornby, who in some ways I looked at him like a father figure. I mean, I admired him. He was a very intelligent man. He was a businessman. He was actually the director of retail for W.H. Smith, was a chain of the biggest booksellers in the UK at the time. And we talked about all sorts of things, literature, music, art, history, and so on. And he actually gave me a book called The Romance of a Bookshop. It was an old antiquarian book. It would have been published in the 1930s, and it was actually about the setting up of Foyle's bookshop where I worked. And he signed it to Anthony with affection and S. Hitch with an X on it. Now, I had kept that book because it was important physical evidence. It was one of the things that wasn't lifted in the Army raid in 1976, because I had it wedged among hundreds of other books that I had. But during the search, the more recent search that the police raided the house, after the raid, I started looking around the house, and I had a searched my study for this book, and I couldn't find it. And not only had the book disappeared, but there was an envelope with old black and white family photographs, and that had vanished as well. So I complained to what's called the Police Ombudsman. It's like an organisation that processes officially complaints against the police. So they allocated an officer who investigated the whole thing. He came out and interviewed me and took down a lot of notes. And he said, I've already contacted the police, and they said there's no way they would have taken photographs or a book from my home. So during the course of his investigation, he actually visited the police station, the evidence room, and asked to see the stuff that they've taken out of my home. And indeed, there was. He found an envelope with the family photos that I had told him, but he said there was no sign of the book. So he then interviewed the officers involved in the search, and the officer who actually lifted and put the photographs in said, I didn't realise it was photographs I was putting in. I thought it was CDs that I was lifting, and he denied any knowledge of the book. So he claims that it was an accidentally lifted the photographs, and the senior officer who then was logging the evidence said he didn't notice that either. So that book has actually vanished, and that was an important part of physical evidence. I mean, the police basically said they were working on intelligence that they had received. And I asked them, I said, well, where did this intelligence come from? But they wouldn't tell me. In fact, they wouldn't even tell the police ombudsman. They wouldn't reveal their sources, and they wouldn't say what the evidence was. So it was all very, very secretive.
Is there any chance that they can reopen that case and charge you again?
Very possibly. I mean, if they could come across and say, well, we have further evidence now, we have something else, we found something else, and we're going to press charges again, it's entirely possible.
Yeah, 'cause that's another very stressful thing in life, having a case hanging over your head for years. It's really another miserable aspect to all this. Now, you mentioned a lot of powerful politicians and stuff like that. Any names we would recognize?
You probably won't recognize them in the USA, but there was one of my clients in particular, a man called Sir Michael Havers. And he's of interest because he subsequently went on to hold the highest legal officer in the United Kingdom. He became the Attorney General. And he was also well known for prosecuting the Guildford Four. I'm not too sure if you're familiar with that case.
I'm not.
But essentially, in 1974, the IRA bombed a couple of pubs in Guildford. It was an atrocity. There were a number of people killed and maimed. But four Irishmen were arrested, and although they pleaded not guilty, they said there's no way they could have done it. They were set up. The whole trial was configured to find them guilty, and it was proven to be one of the biggest miscarriages of justice. So this guy, Michael Havers, was prosecuting. He was a member of the cabinet, and he was prosecuting them at that time. And indeed, when I was being forced in London, they were basically saying the Guildford Four could become the Guildford Five if you don't do what you're told.
Wow.
So he prosecuted the Guildford Four, and he also prosecuted another family who were completely innocent called the Maguires. And they served many, many years in prison for a crime that they did not commit. There was actually an IRA active service unit in London at that time who were committing the bombings. And in fact, after these people were arrested, the bombings continued using exactly the same pattern. So it was clear that they didn't have the bombers. But it was basically just to say to the public, we've got these people. But Sir Michael Havers in particular prosecuted that case. And as a barrister stood up and presented false evidence, he suppressed alibi evidence. It was awful. So he was one of the clients involved. Now, he featured more recently in some of the information that I came across, because I was received anonymously a memo that had been circulated at the Old Bailey at that time. This was during the trial of the Guildford Four. Basically, it was two of the officers in the Old Bailey had expressed concerns about Sir Michael Havers taking an interest in the Playland trial, which was also being prosecuted at the same time in a different courtroom. So they expressed some concerns about that. That was one of the documents that was actually in the safe when it was stolen, a copy of that memo. So then I came across a book written by a journalist called Chapman Pincher. I would recommend that you Google him. He was a very interesting character. But he had the ear of many, many members in government, and they often leaked information to him. He was probably one of the most well-informed journalists in the UK for many years. And he was a good friend of Michael Havers, and Michael Havers was told him a number of indiscretions over the years. But in the 1980s, Chapman Pincher was accused of being a Russian spy, incredibly, along with another guy called Lord Rothschild. It was nonsense, of course, but I think they just wanted to shut him up. So when the police came and they interviewed him for about 12 hours, he says in his book that I made sure that they left with a fat folder marked Havers. If they were going to press charges and take me to court, then I would have to disclose everything that was in this folder about Havers. And it would probably lead to a senior member of the government resigning, and it would be a field day for the opposition, the Labour Party at that time. So after a short while, he was contacted and he was told that they wouldn't be pressing charges. And they returned the documents. Excuse me. Now, I then, on the basis of that, requested a freedom of information, a request to the Metropolitan Police, and I said, please, can I have a copy of these documents that you photographed out of the Pincher's file? And after a number of months, they came back and they listed 4 or 5 exemptions. They say that they couldn't release it, and that they couldn't even confirm if Michael Havers' name was in the documents. So that was another aspect of this that was closed down, that they wouldn't even give the information about Havers. But then I was, excuse me, I'm going to take a drink of water here.
Sure.
Shortly after that request to the Met, I received another document in the post. It was actually posted to the Republic of Ireland and then forwarded on to me, so I don't know who it came from, but I believe it was one of the documents that I had asked the Met for, and it was an internal memo just Sir Michael Havers, and it basically said there's intelligence that leads us to believe that Sir Michael may have been involved with a rent boy, which might explain his interest in the Playland trial. And there were grave concerns that if this became public, it could lead not only to the collapse of the Playland trial, but also the big high-profile Guildford 4 trial. So it talks about this alleged rent boy from Northern Ireland coming over to London and associating with VIPs at that time. And it also talks about this information being passed to the Prime Minister of the day, who was Harold Wilson, and Margaret Thatcher, who was the leader of the opposition, and also the Home Secretary. So the shocking thing is that when I was in London being abused and pimped out to these politicians and prominent business people, the authorities knew about it. It could well be that, I have no doubt now that I was under surveillance at that time. And I sometimes wonder, was I actually being set up to make contact with these people so that they could subsequently be blackmailed?
Yeah.
You know, could some of these politicians be said, we have information that you were associating with a rent boy, and this is the way we want you to vote against a certain thing? So they could have been maybe set up for blackmail at that time. So it's a deep and murky circumstance all around, I think.
Fascinating story, my friend. I tell you, you've lived some life. The book is called The Abuse of Power, A True Story of Sex and Scandal at the Heart of London's Elite. And it's under the name Anthony Daly, D-A-L-Y. You can find it on Amazon. Mr. Daly, we're out of time. What would you like to leave us with?
That's a very profound question.
I know.
The one thing that I brought in my story is that my story is one of redemption. That no matter what you come through, be it, I've been through the troubles in Northern Ireland, the sexual abuse, the subsequent attempts to try and shut me up when I was writing this book. That I believe that it's always good to have faith that things will come right at the end. And that it's important to get the truth out there. You know, there's no rest without justice, and I think that's the important thing. Truth and justice overrides any considerations.
Amen. Amen. I definitely agree with you there, and that's why we do this show and try to get these facts out there that people aren't aware of. Anthony Daly, thank you so much. Once again, the book is The Abuse of Power, A True Story of Sex and Scandal at the Heart of London's Elite, and great reviews on Amazon. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Good night.
And now a word from our sponsors, emailrevealer.com. People ask me all the time, hey, Ed, are you still a private investigator? I sure am. Go to emailrevealer.com. We handle adoption investigations, infidelity investigations, where you give us your spouse's email address. We trace it back to online dating websites, catch them cheating online, email tracing, locate or identify somebody from as little as an anonymous email address. Someone owe you money? Back child support? We can find that deadbeat, locate his hidden assets, locate his hidden bank accounts, find his current place of employment, and even assist you in obtaining a judgment and recover that judgment for you. Emailrevealer.com, digital forensics, computer forensics, cell phone forensics, recover deleted text messages, create a report that you can use in court. Emailrevealer.com, 800-572-9762. The Opperman Report is brought to you by Aquadam.net. You can give them a call at 707-764-2119. A flooded home is never easy to deal with. You're left with the mess to clean up, the insurance companies to deal with, and not to mention all the memories, the precious memories that are lost in the flood. You can never replace those. And Aquadam can be a tool in your arsenal to protect your home and property from the floodwaters. The cofferdam is filled with water to control water and is reusable as long as it's taken care of. It can protect your home or business from rising floodwaters like a dam, but without the beavers.
It can also be used in construction. If you need an area to be dewatered, an aquadam can do the job. An aquadam was used at SeaWorld in Orlando for the Mako roller coaster ride during the coaster's construction by dewatering the work area. An aquadam is now dewatering the work area at San Antonio SeaWorld for their newest roller coaster ride. An aquadam has been used in many construction projects all around the U.S. and all around the world. Now give Aquadam a call, 707-764-2119. You can look them up online at aquadam.net. You can find them on Facebook at Aquadam Inc. You call them up, you email them, you tell them Ed Opperman sent you, and they're going to take 10% off the price. Aquadam.net, 707-764-2119.
Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Maybe the facility you manage could establish new revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services. Cart King International can be the answer to your needs. Cart King is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile coffee, food, and retail carts and kiosks. Cart King has been working with clients and corporations across North America for 20 years, providing innovative designs, custom manufacturing, and timely delivery. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on our website. Please visit us today at www.cart-king.com or just call us at 1-877-986-7771 and get your sales rolling.
If you find yourself in need of legal representation, it can be a very stressful time in your life. In my career, I have dealt with thousands of lawyers, I've dealt with thousands of law firms, and I can confidently recommend to you Keith M. Davidson at kmdlaw.com. Available 24 hours, 7 days a week. Just log into kmdlaw.com. That's kmdlaw.com. Or you can call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. That's 833-4KMD-LAW. Personal injury, wrongful death, STDs, sexual assault, car accidents. They handle it all efficiently and professionally. It doesn't matter how imposing the opposition may be, because the team at kmdlaw.com are battle-tested and fierce. They will not stop until justice prevails. Go to kmdlaw.com or call toll-free 833-4KMD-LAW. If you're in for the fight of your life, stop screwing around and contact KMD Law. PureSoapFlakes.com, 218-568-2525. Have you ever heard of Castile Soap? Pure Soap Flake Company handcrafts fine soap bars, laundry powder, and concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oils from their northern Minnesota facility. Bathe your body and wash your clothes with pure soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium lauryl sulfate, and synthetic additives. Keep it clean, folks. Pure Soap Flake Company products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin, safe for drains and waterways, and work great in high-efficiency washers and top and front-loading machines. They have a little promotion going on. Contact them to order some soap. Mention the Opperman Report. You're going to get a free gift. They're going to send a little extra soap, travel size, soap bars and laundry soap, cleaning soap flakes. I've been using that stuff all day long today. Great stuff. Order today at puresoapflakes.com or give them a call, 218-568-2525, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company is a proud member of the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetic Guild.
Are you ready to change your life, but don't know how to start? Is your stress and worries keeping you awake at night? Have you been battling grief, anxiety, or depression all alone? Have you lost touch with your own sense of being or spirituality? Soul Free Therapies offers professional and affordable live video streaming counseling and coaching services from the comfort of your own home. Sessions offered in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Go to our website at www.soul-free.com and book your first session today.